Portrait of a Fangirl is a web series and podcast created by Temple of Geek. At the core of the project is the importance of telling the stories of women who have found inspiration, growth, and power through fandom. My name is Jenna Wren, and I am the host of Portrait of a Fangirl podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of talking to Victoria Male. Hi, Victoria.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Jenna. I'm thrilled to be here. Be back here at Portrait of a Fangirl in a new exciting context.
I know you were part of the web series, right?
I was so honored to be part of the web series and to get to play dress up and be shot and interviewed by Monica was truly a dream come true.
It's so exciting to see the way ideas evolve and how, this was a web series and now it's a podcast, but at the core, it's the same project and the same love we're sharing for fandom.
Yes. I love the mission. So I'm here to contribute to it however I can.
Yes. So can you please just tell our audience about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, I am a writer. I write for a bunch of different mediums. I've written screenplays. I've written short stories. I'm currently writing on an audio drama. But before I got there, I started working in the film industry about 10 years ago, literally from the bottom up. I was very lucky that I got to intern for my childhood hero, Tobey Maguire, because a huge fandom of mine is Spider-Man. I'm obsessed with Spider-Man and the Spider-Verse. And then I just kind of bounced around for the past 10 years in the entertainment industry. I was a researcher. I worked in casting. I was a personal assistant. And then in 2017, I got a job with Ivan Reitman, who is kind of the godfather of the Ghostbusters franchise. He directed the first movies in the 80s and he produced all subsequent Ghostbuster movies. So I worked with the Ghostbusters franchise and that team for about 5 years in creative development, where I was part of the team that kind of took an idea from script to screen and was like the midwife of any project that we were working on, which was incredibly illuminating and very much like a Hollywood boot camp. And then Ivan passed away in 2022. I moved on to work for Graphic India, which is this really cool media startup trying to kind of create the Marvel of the East using South Asian and East Asian mythologies. I helped them get their American office set up. And then now I've transitioned to writing full time. I've had my 5 short stories published in 14 literary magazines worldwide. I had a couple screenplays do well this past year. One made the love list of the best unproduced romance scripts in Hollywood. Another one made it to the finals of the Nickel Fellowship that's run by the Academy. And then, now I'm here writing on this really fun, splashy audio drama called Murder Overboard for Pocket FM.
Wow, you have had your hands in everything the past decade, huh?
It's like not, it was never it was just out of necessity. It's like, okay, these people will give me money? Sure. Like, what if no one's, especially last year with all those short stories that I wrote, a lot of them are based on my scripts. And it was because we were in a strike and I couldn't do anything with them. So I'm like, let me try to do this. I'll create some IP for myself and then get myself published and see what happens there. And it's just one of those things where you have to especially in Hollywood, I feel like you always have to be resourceful and always kind of look at things slightly from the side and get creative and think out of the box.
Right. I would think, though, that being a part of all these different aspects of Hollywood helped you grow as a creator yourself.
And definitely, you hit the nail right on the head. I think I was thinking about this actually yesterday because I'm really lucky with the manager I work with. It's very much a partnership. I'm pitching as many companies and places we should go out to with my material as he is. And that, I think, has really helped me become a more savvy creator and writer and producer. The fact that I did have almost a decade of doing almost everything else. So I kind of know how the sausage is made and how to work certain things. And I'm really also blessed that I have a great Rolodex of people that I can call, that I'm finally now starting to call on favors with.
Right. They're now your peers.
Yes. It's very exciting.
Yes. I want to get into your career in Hollywood. I know I'll get distracted if I start now because there's so much to talk about. But I want to start off by asking you something we ask all of our guests is how they view the term fangirl and if that's changed over the years.
Oh man, that's such a loaded question for me and such a loaded term because I think It's gone through like peaks and valleys. I think when I was younger, I loved being a fangirl. I was so unapologetically a fangirl, especially when I discovered like the OG Spider-Man that Tobey Maguire was in and Kirsten Dunst, and directed by Sam Raimi. That was the movie that really made me fall in love with movies and really opened my eyes to engaging with fandom. And then, so I don't want to age myself too much, but, it was so interesting because back when I was younger, those liking superheroes was so gendered. And I think that was the first time I ever ran into shame or a negative reaction to being super passionate about something that I loved, where they're like, that's for like, why do you like Spider-Man? That's for boys. I was like, no, it's not. Or I was like, I don't care. Like, I just like it. And then I think throughout my adolescence and my early 20s, I was so ashamed of being a fangirl, and it felt like it felt like something I had to hide. And I used to host this podcast called Your Biggest Fangirl, and me and my co-host Kristen, who's a contributor at Temple of Geek, and one of my dearest friends, we made these 10 rules of fangirling. And I think I'm pretty sure the first rule was hide your crazy, which I do stand by. It's always good to kind of try to play things cool if you can. But I think I had so much shame and I felt so judged for how much I liked things and how passionate I was. And I think it's really only in the past couple of years that I've learned it's a superpower, and it's actually something I can use. And all those years I've spent fangirling are actually now coming back to serve me in ways I didn't expect. So now I love being a fangirl, and I feel like I've done such a good job, or I'm proud of myself for really owning the term and owning who I am and owning what I'm passionate about, rather than trying to hide it and play things cool. So yeah, I know that was a winding road I took everyone on, but that's kind of my relationship with the term in a nutshell. It's loaded. It's loaded.
It is.
I can't speak. A nutgal, my God. But yeah, so.
Well, it is a fangirl podcast, so nut gal, I don't know, it works.
It's me. I think that is how you would describe it. She's nutty and she's a gal, so nut gal.
Yeah, it's the new term for fangirl now.
We're creating more in the lexicon as we speak.
You can catch us on Portrait of a Nut Girl next.
Yeah, exactly. That's my spin-off podcast to this.
Yeah, it's definitely something you see nowadays, where I feel like women are into these things that I think the media sometimes can portray it as, oh, it's trendy. They're into this because it's trendy. But I think it's just that women are more apt now to show that they like these things that maybe we were kind of gatekept from in the past.
Yeah, and I think women were so we were so dismissed too, because I remember when I was doing my degree in communication studies in college, we did this little mini student documentary about vampires in pop culture. And I remember we interviewed this brilliant grad student who was saying, how important Twilight was, even though people poo-poo it, it really showed that women have purchasing power and financial power. And that's honestly what speaks to the Hollywood executives. And that's how we get more of the things we love on screen. And so I think, honestly, there wouldn't be a Bridgerton if the fangirls hadn't shown out for like Hunger Games and Twilight in the aughts. It's weird too. It's like, wait, no, this is something we could own, and something that actually gives us power. And I was reflecting on this earlier this week, how when I was working in development, that my colleagues kind of used to look at me sideways for wanting to bring in people I was super passionate about. And I think there was a very gendered kind of misogynist slant with that, where they're like, oh, you just have a crush on this actor. You just want to bring in this person because you want to be friends with them, or you're trying to social climb, which like wasn't totally untrue. But also it's like, why wouldn't we, I was so privileged to be in this position, why wouldn't I bring in people I'm genuinely excited to work with and collaborate with?
Right.
So yeah, I feel like it's a good time to be a fangirl, because I really feel like we're changing kind of how we're viewed.
Right. And it's interesting that you bring up the fact that you worked on Ghostbusters, because I feel like if we're going to hit on fangirl culture and women in the media, that was one of the biggest things we've seen in recent Hollywood history. It caused such almost like an uproar.
Yeah. And as someone who worked really, I came on right after that movie came out to the Ghostbusters franchise, and I will always maintain, because I think it's a decent movie. I just think everyone felt crestfallen by it and disappointed by it because it didn't have any connective tissue to the original lore. And I think now that we're living in this media landscape of multiverses and the MCU and everything all being connected, and there being, even if it's not outwardly connected, there's like a wink at something that all the fans can recognize. I think that was something that movie was missing for me personally. I mean, I feel like Chris Hemsworth being hilarious really made up for a lot, but yeah, it was really shocking to experience as a woman creating and who consumes media. And then it also made me really happy when Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I got to be on that movie from literally like inception to release, how well received that was, with two female protagonists, Phoebe and Callie. So it's very interesting how women, I think we're always in we're always in process of negotiating how we want to be seen and perceived in the media, both as like an object on the screen and also as a consumer of it.
Right. Yeah, it's a very complicated beast. It's all very complicated.
Yes.
When was the moment that you personally first found yourself fangirling?
I've thought about this, and it's so funny, because I think I really do feel like I came out of the womb this way. And the evidence for that is I remember when I was 5 years old, I saw the Disney animated Hercules, and I was like, this is art. And X amount of years later, I still maintain that. That movie's brilliant, bloody brilliant. But I remember I was so enamored with that movie, and that movie ignited a lifelong passion and love of Greek mythology. And I will never forget my poor grandmother. She was babysitting me. I think my parents were like doing a couple's trip to Hawaii or something. And I remember I literally dictated a story to her about Hercules and Meg from the Disney movie going to Olympus. And I made her not only write it out, but like draw all the photos, like draw all the pictures for me. And it was hilarious. They were going to heaven and they took a plane naturally. So I think again, it's been like, this has been something that has kind of been inherent within me. So that was, I think, my first real instance of fangirling. And then I think when I stumbled upon Spider-Man, that kind of just ratcheted everything up to the next level.
Yeah, it's so great that you mentioned Hercules. Like, I think for our generation, it's the presence of those Disney movies was defining of our childhood. So you can easily see how that would play a part in those formative years.
Yes, and I think they are brilliant movies. I think that's the best. I think our generation was so spoiled that we had them as children, because it's been such a joy to rediscover them and rewatch them as an adult and pick up on all the smart little jokes they put in that naturally kids would have missed. And I tell everyone I do. I like am an unabashed Hercules stan, because I think also now, knowing what I know now about Greek mythology and music and musicals and writing and all that good stuff, I'm like, the fact Alan Menken went Greek chorus gospel choir, I'm good. Like, my mind won't be blown by that for the rest of my life. Like, it's so freaking genius.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I don't know who would have married those ideas besides Alan Menken.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will always be grateful for it.
No, it's funny because you're not the first guest I've spoken to that have pointed to Hercules particularly.
Really? Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, usually I'm like the lone weirdo who loves Hercules.
Oh no, it's actually probably, I always have it tied with The Little Mermaid, because The Little Mermaid's very special to me. It came out when I was like 1.
Yeah.
But yeah. I love Hercules too. And I spoke with Rachel Smythe. She does, Lore Olympus, and that was,
oh my God, which I'm a huge
Olympus.
fan of. I can't believe I'm on a podcast that also had Rachel Smythe on as a guest, because I love this.
And we wouldn't have Lore Olympus if somebody didn't fangirl over Hercules. What are you currently fangirling over?
So it's so funny. I feel like I'm in a nostalgia fangirl era where I'm revisiting some old loves. I think right now, even though the movie came out about a year ago, I'm still loving Across the Spider-Verse and the animated Spider-Verse, because I think it's just so brilliant. And I'm sorry, but like you made Oscar Isaac tall and a Spider-Man. Like, what am I supposed to do? I'm only a human woman. And but also the storytelling and the art, and like it's just so exciting, because I also think that series opened up this amazing way that everyone could be part of that fandom, and everyone could have a spider sona, because there's infinite amounts of different dimensions and earths that you could be a superhero on. So I love that. I think because it's the 20th anniversary of Spider-Man 2, I'm very much in my old school Spider-Man era, especially with Kirsten Dunst doing all this press for Civil War. It just reminds me how much I love her, because I think she's one of the most brilliant and underrated actresses in Hollywood. And then my other little nostalgia fangirl moment is I really have been getting back into Smallville, because that was my intro to the DC superheroes in canon. I got very obsessed with Smallville as a preteen, and I used to throw tantrums if I couldn't watch the episodes, which is a very fun, normal thing to share about yourself. But yeah, so I'm like weirdly like in a Superman, Spider-Man moment at the moment.
That's so fun. So I'm still kind of stuck on that. You just said it was the 20th anniversary of Spider-Man 2.
I can't. Don't get me started.
I
Like, it was 5 minutes ago. What are you talking about?
I don't think I can get past that. I'm stuck there.
We just spend the rest of the podcast like in a ball, rocking back and forth.
I cannot
contemplating the passage of time.
Wow, that's a. Whew. It's amazing to show what has really been defining cultural movies and entertainment in our lives.
Right.
We have a good time. It's a good time to have grown up.
Yeah, and I think also it's so interesting too, because I think Spider-Man and Smallville both so informed all the media of that genre that we see now. So it's odd. It's bizarre.
Yeah, Spider-Man was my first introduction to superhero culture too. I didn't, read comics or anything. In the movie, it was like, I don't think I expected at the time. I mean, I think I'm going to date myself now. I think I was 13 when the first one came out. And I don't think I ever expected, especially as like a girl in 8th grade, to like a superhero. Mm-hmm. And it just immediately caught me, and you spiral.
Yeah, and then next thing you know, it's 20 years later and you're still talking about it.
No, and it's still, then you have, who is your favorite Spider-Man? It's a huge debate. All the generations can talk about it.
It's Tobey. I'm sorry. Like, again, like Tobey. I'm sorry. We wouldn't have Andrew. We wouldn't have Tom if it wasn't for Tobey.
I do agree. Yeah, I agree with that, but I love Andrew Garfield so much.
I know. I love him too. I think they can all, and that's what I loved about No Way Home, is that they can all like be their own thing, and we can all love them, and we don't have to choose. But I always joke, I always tell everyone when I interned for Tobey, my first, in his production company, Material Pictures, my first summer in LA, I remember I like once had a conversation with him, and it was going too well for too long, and I had to run away. I'm like, it's like any second now I'm going to like blurt out that like every birthday wish until like from age 11 to now, or, for about 10 years has been like to meet you. So I'm just gonna Homer Simpson out of here.
Yeah, but while we're ahead of the game.
Yes, yeah.
So getting now really into the crux of your Hollywood work, working as a writer in Hollywood comes with a lot of struggles. For a woman, many times these struggles are intensified just due to gender dynamics. So what was the experience like for you when you first started trying to break into the field?
I think it took me a long time to even show anyone my writing, because I think there was this very like subliminal misogynistic message of like, you could never write anything as good as what, all the male writers that we work with. And I don't think it was ever explicit. It was one of those implicit things. But it was funny because I had this idea. I'd taken screenwriting courses in college. I knew I always wanted to work in film. Working actually for Tobey's company, Material, really opened my eyes to how awesome that process was and how exciting it was to be on both sides of it, to be the writer as well as to be the producer and the development executive shaping it. But I think I was, I was afraid to leave my comfort zone for a really long time because of it, because it's so hard. And it's not, I don't think it's ever been harder right now, just as we're still in the aftermath of the strikes last year. And, but I had this idea for a screenplay. I took a UCLA course back in 2019 to write it out, like to get the guidance and the accountability I knew I needed because I was still working full time for Ivan to at least have a draft. And then it wasn't until I sent it to a manager acquaintance of mine being like, would you, it was like low key a conflict of interest, but I was like, would you be open to reading me? Like maybe repping me? Would you just read me? I've met with a ton of your clients. And he was like, yeah, of course. And then 3 weeks later, he was like, yeah, your pilot's really good. And your feature film script, I want to go out with this weekend. And then all of a sudden I was a writer. And then all of a sudden huge A-list movie stars, some who are Avengers, were reading my script. And I was like, wait, oh my God, I could have been doing this all along. It's one of those things where I think, like, especially women, we're told to like minimize ourselves and be humble. And it wasn't until I got the courage to take a shot that I found myself on this new path of a career that I had secretly always wanted to pursue.
Wow, it sounds like it kind of went from 0 to 60 for you. It must have been a whirlwind.
It was a whirlwind, and then it went like back to 0 because no one bought the script. But then, but it was huge too because I was like, okay, no, I can do this. This is something I can do. I am good at this. And then ever since then, I've written more and more scripts. I've started collaborating with people. I've started acquiring IP. I'm now staffed on a podcast. So it's amazing. But it wasn't until I took that chance and I took that shot in the dark that I could realize that dream and start and realize that I had the goods, even like to start to end, like just to enter the struggle. Cause I feel like the struggle never goes away. I'll never forget me and my ex-boyfriend had this crazy night out with Liev Schreiber. And I remember hearing him talk, like, even though he's like this amazing actor and he was, it was during Ray Donovan and like he was this huge star and he was like, I remember overhearing conversations where and they sounded very similar to mine as like this little baby trying to make her way in the industry. And so I think like the struggle's always going to be there. I think you just learn how to take it in stride better. And I think for the longest time, I was afraid to even like jump in the pool. I was afraid to even like get into the struggle. I feel like I was content for too long sitting on the sidelines. And as hard as the struggle is, I am rather proud and happy that I'm at least in it.
It's lovely. Sometimes I wonder, is it a writer thing or is it a female thing where you're kind of a little bit afraid to say, hey, I'm really good at this. And I struggle with it because I don't want someone to think that maybe I'm cocky, but I think it's a gendered thing. I really do.
Oh, I would totally agree. I think it's, and again, there's exceptions to every rule. Generalizations are just that. But I think, I just remember I was so much better at pitching my friend's stuff than pitching mine. And it's something I've really had to work on in the past couple of years. And I've gotten to a better place to be like, I have something to offer. And also it's when I'm pitching myself, I'm pitching a collaboration rather than like, it's me. And so, yeah, but it's so, in my opinion, it's totally gendered because I think we're taught to self-efface and even if we are getting praise, like we have to thank and like, again, like take the spotlight off of us.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a little bit of psychology thrown in with the fangirling.
Oh, yeah.
What sort of obstacles did you face when you first got into this business?
I think the biggest one is that you are one of so many people who want to do this and the competition is fierce. And I think also because the competition is so fierce rather, the people who are in the places to hire and provide the opportunities are always looking for what they can get away with, like the least they can get away with. Because they know even if you leave, there'll be 10 other people who would be happy to work for like minimum wage for this job. So I think that's a really big one. I think, again, the misogyny and even after Me Too, I think everyone knows now not to like slap their secretary's butt and like tell a woman she has to sleep with someone for a job. That being said, we still have such a long way to go of championing voices. And I think as someone who's written quite a few screenplays and a couple of my screenplays have male protagonists, it's something I've actually encountered with female-led production companies. We're like, oh, no, we female leads only. And I hate to be like, I hear you. Like on the surface, that's a beautiful mission. But at the same time, I would argue that my scripts written by a woman, last I checked, are still feminist scripts, and they're still written from the female gaze. So I think what I'm noticing now, it's combating like this old school misogyny, as well as this like kind of narrow idea that the powers that be, who are mostly cis white male, have allowed of like what a strong woman looks like and what a feminist project looks like. It's like getting rid of the last of this very like limiting belief, and then also expanding what is considered to be a feminist and a female led project. Because I think now we have that they're allowed to exist, but we have a very limited view of what's acceptable and what fits into that box.
Right. I mean, I would think it's kind of like you don't want a female lead for the sake of having a female lead. You have to have a story that goes along or something that's interconnected, not just for the sake of feminism.
Exactly. And then also, like, God forbid the woman isn't totally likable. God forbid she's complicated.
No, oh yeah, God forbid.
Yeah, no, because we know that's not what women are like in real life. So I guess that's on me.
No.
Yeah.
Did you ever second guess your career choice?
I mean, it's like daily, like especially right now. And that's why I think it's so important. One of the best pieces of advice I got before I moved out to California was you have to build your tribe. You have to find your community. And I'm really fortunate that I have a great support system of friends and family and collaborators. And because I mean, there's so much rejection. And I feel like you develop a thick skin and you get better and better and better at letting it kind of roll off like water off a duck's back. But at the end of the day, it's, I think of my scripts as my little brain babies. And at the end of the day, it's someone saying no to something you've put so many hours of blood, sweat, and tears and love into. And it can get to you every now and then. So that's why I think it's so important to have people who kind of will like pick you back up, put you back on your feet and kind of be like, keep going. This is just part of it. And I think that's why it's great that we're having conversations like this. And that I think it's actually kind of great that we have all these podcasts, because it allows us to hear more from these creators. And I think it helps people like me and other emerging artists to feel less alone. Because when you're hearing that, these people you look up to also had the same doubts and second guess, just like you, it's an encouragement to keep going. I mean, it was so interesting. I went to the Santa Barbara Film Festival back in February, and Bradley Cooper was one of the artists honored, and he had this really amazing career retrospective. And it was just so interesting to me because the moderator would bring up like The Hangover or like all these amazing films that he did. And usually Bradley's first response would be like, I was so scared. I had no idea that this was going to work. And so I think it's good to know it's a weird, like, even when I'm second guessing myself and I just want to like run away to a dog farm and pet all the dogs and stop trying, it's good to know that like this is actually part of the process.
Right. Everybody, no matter how successful, goes through the same fears, the same struggles.
Exactly.
So you had mentioned a little bit earlier about some of the scripts you've written, and I really want to talk to you about these works that you've done.
Oh, thank you.
Talked about your script Showstopper, and that was the one that had made it into the final for the Nickel Fellowship.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So first off, can you just tell me a little bit about Showstopper?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to. Basically, it is, in a nutshell, not a nutgal, but a nutshell. It's about the making of Singing in the Rain. And I think a lot of people don't realize that not only did Gene Kelly star in that movie, he co-directed it. So it's him trying to make this magnum opus, what's considered his greatest piece of work, while his marriage is falling apart. And there's two reasons his marriage is falling apart. One is that his wife is blacklisted as a communist, because this is during the early 1950s in Hollywood when the Red Scare was raging. And then also she's not exactly faithful to him. So it's him trying to make this what will become this amazing piece of cinema history while his personal life is in shambles. And I related to that deeply. Um, so that's singing. So that's the Singing in the Rain script, Showstopper. And for those who don't know what the Nickel Fellowship is, it is basically the Oscars screenwriting competition. It's put on every year by the Academy. And I honestly could not believe that I made it to the finals. I actually had submitted Showstopper the year before and didn't make the quarterfinals. So to be in the top 13 scripts out of the nearly 5,600 that were submitted, like just saying that out loud still blows my mind. And I'm really grateful.
Right. That's a huge accomplishment. The pool
Thank you.
alone is overwhelming.
Nuts.
Wow.
Nuts. Like I remember when I got the quarterfinalist email, I was like, oh, cool. And then I got the semifinalist email, and then I'm on a Zoom where they're telling me I'm a finalist, and it was just madness.
Wow. That also just sounds like such a great script. I would watch that movie in a second.
Oh my God, it would be a lot of me like on the phone with my mom. So I don't know how exciting that would be. But thank you.
That's quite an accomplishment. What was your reaction when you found out that you made it to the finals?
Shock. I think, well, it's funny because I got this email saying like I had like from the Academy, and it's like very intimidating still when you get an email from Oscars.org and they're like, we need you on this Zoom at a certain time to talk about your script. And I was like, oh, this is it. I'm getting sued. Like they know, like, honestly, I could show you the text messages with my manager being like, I think I need to talk to a lawyer. Like, I don't think this is good. I think, because I'm writing about real people and real life events. And so I'm like, they're mad at me. And then I was so ready to like fight for my life. And then I remember on the Zoom, they're like, because it was me and the other finalists, and they say like, we had a question about your script. And I was like, or because they said, oh no, they said, we noticed some similarities within your script. Like, how? I wrote about Gene Kelly 4 years ago. Like, what? And they're like, yeah, how does it feel to be a finalist? And I think all of it, and I think that was the vibe of almost everyone on the call, where like there was something seriously wrong. And then when we found out that, we're like, oh, like it was shock and relief and just like total elation and happiness, because it was no small feat, and they really made us work for it. So.
Right. They knew they were dangling that over your heads.
So scary.
Oh, wow. And another script of yours you mentioned a little bit earlier is The Love List. And you said that was featured on the list for the best unproduced romance scripts in Hollywood.
Yes. So the script I wrote was called Sculpted, and it made the first ever Love List, which I'm super honored to be a part of, which are the best unproduced romance scripts, both for film and television in Hollywood. I think because it's actually really exciting that the romantic comedy is going through, and just the genre of romance to begin with is kind of going through this really exciting renaissance. I think because we're centering these films more on the female gaze. And so I wrote Sculpted. Sculpted, obviously, you can draw the line from Sculpted, which is a gender-flipped, anachronistic version of the myth of Pygmalion. Like, you can take that, and then you can like draw back to me watching Hercules when I was 5, because I've always loved Greek mythology, and I always wanted to write like my Greek mythology piece. And and the myth of Pygmalion is one of my favorites and for those who don't know, it's basically man sculpts ideal woman. Ideal woman is brought to life by Aphrodite. Ideal woman and man fall in love and live happily ever after. It's literally, I think, one of the only happy myths out there, because usually it's like incest, death, someone gets turned into a tree. It's, Greek mythology is wild. Don't let Hercules is like the sanitized version of what was going on. And and it's so interesting because that myth has been portrayed in modern pop culture in so many different ways. Like My Fair Lady is the myth of Pygmalion, Ruby Sparks, Mannequin, Weird Science. And I mean, I love all those movies, but I was like, why haven't we ever flipped it? Like, why is it always the man creating the woman? Why is the woman always the object? So I wanted it to be the woman who creates a man, because my lead character, Pygmalia, can't seem to find a man who wants to be in a relationship with her if she doesn't want to give up her craft of sculpting after they get married. So it's a very, I like to think I took a very modern issue of like women trying to quote unquote have it all, and then dressed it up in like fun and like chitons, which are ancient Greek togas, and like set it in Cyprus. Because I feel like that's honestly the way I think audiences know when you're being preached to. But I think they're a little less allergic if they're having a lot of fun while you're doing it. So I tried to make it as fun and kind of sexy yet wholesome as possible. I think, like, in addition to Hercules, a couple of my big inspirations and references for sculpted were, well, Madeline Miller's books. If you haven't read Circe or Song of Achilles and you like Greek mythology, like, honestly, after this podcast is over, just get those books immediately. And then also I kind of wanted sculpted to feel like our flag means death and I Dream of Jeannie. Like, I just wanted to be kind of fun and silly and sexy, but not in a way that felt like creepy at the same time.
It's funny you mentioned Madeline Miller. As you were answering that, I was going to say, have you read Circe? Have you read The Song of Achilles?
Song of Achilles, it was like one of those books I didn't want to finish because I loved both those books so much. And it's like you're like voraciously reading, but then when you realize you only have like 20 pages left, you're like, no, no.
It's probably my favorite book I've ever read. It's so good and heartbreaking.
Heaven. I know. I can't wait. I know her next one is going to be Persephone, and I'm like frothing at the mouth for it.
Is it really? I didn't know that.
It's going to be sick. It's going to be such a slay.
Oh my gosh. Wow. See, now you have two Greek mythology fangirls just going off the rails.
Yeah, and then we've completely derailed the podcast. Fabulous.
Yeah, can we get Madeline Miller on the line?
Yeah. Oh my God, if only.
That's amazing. I love the idea of gender flipping it. I think I really can't believe it hasn't been done before.
I mean, like, I'm sure maybe it has in like some other capacity, but I couldn't find any examples in mainstream media. So I said, all right, I'm going to do it. And no one's going to make it as weird as I do. So like, let's go.
Yeah, embrace the weird.
Exactly.
So you, again, mentioned earlier about a podcast that you're currently working on at this very moment.
Yes.
And that's called Murder Overboard, right?
Yes, Murder Overboard on Pocket FM.
Yes, I am super excited when you told me about this because I love fictionalized podcasts. And this is going to be that sort of vibe, right? Like a serialized fiction podcast?
Yes, so it's basically it's like a real audio drama where it's a story, but it's like a radio play. Like you hear it's all audio, and it's based on a series of books by Steve Higgs about a woman who, after she discovers her husband cheating on her with her best friend, empties their bank account and goes on a 3-month around the world cruise and gets and finds herself kind of becoming an amateur detective and investigating all the wild things that go on board. And it's been super fun to work on it. I have a great team at Pocket on our show, and it's again, I think it should come out in June 2024-ish, and I think it's like the perfect fun summer listen while you're, I don't know, driving, at the beach, walking, cleaning, whatever. It's like, I think it's really fun because it feels like we're creating like a really, really delicious piece of ear candy for everyone.
It kind of sounds almost like a little bit of a modernized Agatha Christie sort of thing,
Yes.
right?
Yes, kind of, yes. Except like I don't think Patty or Patricia, our lead, is quite as, she's learning to become as like shrewd as Ms. Marple. This is her like Ms. Marple origin story. But yeah, it's super fun. It's also just fun to like pretend I'm on a cruise all day and like, because obviously it's an around the world cruise, so they stop in all these different places, and I like, oh no, I have to research Bermuda. Okay, if I must.
Oh, pull my arm, right? Twist my arm.
To pretend I'm in the Caribbean. Well, if you say so.
And I'm sure that helps if you're stuck in your office. At least you can kind of get a little bit of a vacation when you're researching these exotic locations. It's so true. One of the scripts I wrote during the pandemic was set on a mountain in Wales. And even though it was a horror movie, it was such a joy to write because I was in my apartment in Los Angeles where I could only like really go to the grocery store and maybe like go out for a run in the morning. But when I was writing, I got to pretend I was on a mountain in Wales. Right. It's escapism. Even though there were like tons of like mythological monsters on it. It was still, I was in control of them, so it was still a lot of fun. So you were safe. Yes. How does writing a podcast script differ from some of the other projects that you've created in the past?
It's a great challenge, honestly, because usually when you're writing for screen, it's all about images. And I remember one of my wonderful screenwriting teachers, Matt Harrison, he goes, you have pretend that someone is watching your movie over someone's shoulder on a plane. It's like, even without the sound, they should know kind of what's happening. So in traditional screenwriting, it's all about the images and making sure the visuals work and visual storytelling. Whereas for an audio drama or a radio play, you're doing it all has to be sound. And dialogue is so important for the screen, but it becomes even more important when you're writing and trying to communicate everything you need to the audience with dialogue or sound effects in a way that doesn't feel like, all right, now I'm telling you exactly what you need to know. So it's been a really fun challenge and like has taught me a lot about using sound effects and just kind of, I don't know, it's an interesting way to kind of sharpen my skills as a writer.
Right. It's that cliche advice of the show, don't tell, right?
Yeah, but then how do you do that when like you're showing through sound and
Right.
you don't have images? It's a really, I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's like the one puzzle I like solving. It's like the one challenge that I get excited by. Like, don't give me Sudoku, give me an audio drama.
Were you a fan of audio dramas and fiction podcasts before you started working on this?
Oddly enough, not too much. Like I know, what was the one we were talking about earlier, Jenna, with
I
Julianne
should have
Moore?
written it down. It was one with Julianne Moore and Oscar Isaac. Is that
Yes,
No, I've
the
listened to so many
pandemic.
of them.
I know. Oh my God,
I'm gonna look
it's
it
so
up as I
annoying.
have you.
That was one that I listened to. I usually tend to like nonfiction podcasts, but I'm also a really big fan of, I guess it must have been 10-ish years ago, Kenneth Branagh did a radio version of one of my favorite plays of all time, which is Cyrano de Bergerac. And he's Cyrano, I forget who's Roxanne, and this young up-and-coming actor, I don't think anyone's ever heard of him, Tom Hiddleston, is Christian. And yeah, it's like so much fun. And I think that was such an education on leveraging drama in an audio space. So I was not the biggest fan. So again, it's just added to kind of the excitement and the challenge of tackling this project.
Right. It is called K63, by the way. That's what the
K60, I
podcast is.
kept wanting, I'm in my Smallville moment like era. And so I kept wanting to call it Section 33, which is like this weird thing on Smallville. And I was like, that's not right. I'm confusing properties here. So thank you.
I
Yes,
was thinking Order 66, like Star Wars. We're like all over the board.
Yes.
But that's a really fun one. That's one of the ones I listened to recently. It's
Yeah.
on Spotify. It's, like I said, Oscar Isaac and Julianne Moore. And it's so cool that we both have listened to it because, I would think that this is kind of like the genre that you're working on. This is Murder Overboard.
Yes, it is. I will say Murder Overboard is a little more splashy and soapy than K63, which is all about like time travel and pandemics and stuff.
Yes,
and I remember when I was listening to it on the tube in London, and we weren't like, it was like back in 2022, so we weren't kind of where we are in the pandemic. And I was like, oh no, I'm getting sick as we speak. I could feel it. No, but no, I mean, they're both great. And again, I think it's kind of lovely that I think even in this era of like CGI everything, that we're all kind of returning to audio dramas and something you can merely listen to. And I think it really speaks to how our imaginations are still the most important thing you need when you're viewing a piece or experiencing a piece of art.
Right. That's what it comes down to. And that's coming out, you said, next month already, right?
I believe so. Pocket works quick. We haven't gotten I've been told summer 2024 is when we'll be on the airwaves on their app. Pocket FM has their own app where you can find Murder Overboard.
I'm so excited to listen to this. I cannot wait.
If you can't afford a cruise, this will be the perfect thing to
my summer vacation. My summer vacation is your podcast. What is some advice that you would give to women who are trying to break into a career as a writer in Hollywood?
I think one of the biggest things that has helped me in my decade now of working in this industry is recognizing that your social life is a job. I think that's something that I think people who don't work in this industry don't fully understand, because relationships are so pivotal. I remember I had a friend who's won an Emmy. He was on a huge TV show, and he was on the TV. He started on that TV show in 2010. We were having this discussion in like 2021, and he goes, "That show that everyone knows me for, that was the last audition I booked. Everything since then has been through relationships and friendships and collaborators wanting to work with me again." So I think, everyone in Hollywood, but it's a fine line to walk, because everyone's like, networking, how can you help me? How can you help me? But I think the way you really stand out in this industry is if you are out there creating relationships, but you make them authentic and genuine, and your lovely, authentic self, because then people are like, "Oh, I want to work with you. You're awesome. You're not like these people who just want something from me." Because I think, Hollywood can get so transactional so quickly. So I think it's realizing it's this thing of like knowing how to market yourself, but also not selling your soul while you're at it, and really prioritizing authentic connection. And then I also think just believe, like, having confidence in yourself. And part of the reason I think I found that confidence was working in development. You read a lot of bad scripts. So it's like, okay, well, if this is what's getting submitted to Ivan Reitman, then like, I don't know, maybe I should try it. I wish I could give like a more like empowering, inspirational like story or a piece of advice. But sometimes it's like, I don't know, everyone else is doing it. Why not you? And just kind of taking away, because I think especially as women, we tend to put, or at least I don't want to speak for any other woman, but like me, I'm really good at creating my own obstacles and my own boundaries and my own limits. And I think as a woman, especially in this industry where people are tearing you down until something hits, and then they're building you up only to tear you down again. I think it's really important to know who you are, what you have to offer. And something I love that my mother always says is, let them say no. Don't say no to yourself. Let them say no.
That is amazing advice. And I think a great note to end this wonderful conversation on.
Oh, Victoria, no, it's over. I'm having too much fun.
I know. Listen, we could talk. I think that we could go on for a really long time, but it might go off the rails.
Yeah, we're just like we're just crying about Song of Achilles or Circe by the end of this. Yeah.
It's just us having a conversation is the rest of the podcast, talking about what we love. But maybe we should do like an Instagram live or something. That's more.
Oh my God, I would love that. I'd have so much fun doing that.
But thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me today and talk about your amazing projects and giving me your story.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much.